All right, Ann Madden from Proximity Telehealth here, back with video number 2 on incontinence. So what we're talking about here is stress urinary incontinence. We're going to focus on this one first. So what happens for stress urinary incontinence is, here is your pelvis, okay, so it sits in your hips right here. Here's your pubic symphysis. If you want to find that, you've reached down. It's the first bony surface that you feel. Then your pelvic floor is a bowl that sits within your pelvis here. Its job is to do a lot of different things, and one of them is to make sure that you don't pee when you don't want to be peeing, that you're able to control that pee. So what will happen with stress urinary incontinence is that there's too much pressure down. There's too much of a force down on this pelvic floor, and it overpowers the sphincter that is supposed to be holding tight and closed in your urethra, and that is where the pee leaks out. So this can happen with jumping, this can happen with sneezing, this can happen with increased pressure down. So if you're holding your breath, that's another thing that really significantly increases pressure down. So with stress urinary incontinence, some of the main things that we focus on are reducing the amount of pressure that comes down on someone's pelvic floor. Okay, sometimes that can also be the strength of the pelvic floor, that it's not as strong as it was prior to having a baby, because we know that things stretch and move and sometimes can tear during that time. The other thing that can happen is that your coordination is lost. So your brain has to speak to your pelvic floor to automatically turn it on as we jump, as we sneeze, as we cough. When there is a big traumatic event that happens to the pelvic floor, such as a birth, even a completely normal birth, that's a traumatic event to the pelvic floor because it has opened and a large thing has come out of the bottom. So your body turns off some of those signals from your brain to your pelvic floor to protect it. It will turn on your really big muscles to help protect this pelvic floor. So when you need the pelvic floor to turn on automatically, that brain connection is just not there at that point. So that's what I mentioned before. We treat stress urinary incontinence with strengthening, with coordination, and with reducing the amount of pressure down on that pelvic floor and that sphincter.